Throughout the heavens and earth, I alone am the fraudulent one.
Hey, this guy's a great big phony!
Ladies and gentlemen, Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 230 all but handed a red-nosed Sukuna for his clown behavior. Because even with Mahoraga, he could not defeat Satoru freaking Gojo.
That's why he's the GOAT!
Yep, after domain clash number... let me check my notes. 5. Sukuna felt the threat of irreparable damage since all physical attacks were out of the question, and Gojo had also figured out how to destroy Malevolent Shrine. Sukuna had to summon Mahoraga-kun to his rescue.
That's right, you're a big fat phony!
This kaiju-sized Shikigami had already adapted to Unlimited Void, and we all thought it was Gojova. But wait, how the heck did Sukuna even summon Mahoraga? After all, he was supposed to be paralyzed from the sure hit effect of Gojo's domain. Well, no, because Sukuna played us all.
We have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived.
Gojo's rapid-fire thoughts tells us that it was impossible for Mahoraga to adapt to his domain from the 0.01 seconds earlier, since the wheel did not spin and the Shikigami itself was summoned later. Basically, for the adaptation to work, either Mahoraga itself or its user has to get hit by any attack, or in other words, take the burden of adapting to it. For example, in his battle against Yoruzu, Sukuna himself took on all the attacks for Maharaga's adaptation. That is how he was able to see through Yoruzu's technique. But as far as this battle is concerned, Unlimited Void's sure hit attack had been set off by Malevolent Shrine each time because they were equal in strength, and Sukuna had taken the hit only once. And well, like we said, he was meant to be paralyzed from that, meaning that Mahoraga could not have adapted to Gojo's domain, as neither it nor Sukuna took on the burden earlier, unless someone else had suffered the consequences of 5 back-to-back Unlimited Voids at full power. It surely won't be a 15-year-old kid, Gojo's son, the character who won the popularity poll, right?
No!
You wish! Gege Akutami has once again found a target, and it's none other than Megumi. His life update just got even worse.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Throughout the last 5 domain attacks, Sukuna wasn't being hit by Unlimited Void's sure hit attack because he was protecting himself with Malevolent Shrine. And since he wasn't being hit, he left Megumi vulnerable so that he could attach the wheel to him and trigger Mahoraga's adaptation. This is why in chapter 228, we saw that the wheel of Mahoraga was turning but in the shadows, meaning that Sukuna had already thought ahead and put his plan into motion way earlier. Hence, the wheel was turning over Megumi. Like bro's giving competition to Yamcha now because he just got his ass beat in a fight that he's not even in. Now, we all know Jujutsu Kaisen takes huge inspiration from Japanese folklore, just like many other manga do. For example, you probably recognize names like Izanami and Izanagi, right? Well, it's now possible to play as these mythological beings alongside many more, all thanks to Dislike. It's not just a game, but an ongoing series of urban myth comics set in an epic futuristic universe. Huge portals called miracles have appeared in cities causing chaos and disaster. However, they have given certain people divine powers from the gods. This is how Odin, a god of war, can take shape of a lit motorcycle. Just like how we all sit and wait for the next chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen each week, Dislike is always introducing new events and a wide range of diverse characters, which you can use to build your Esper squad and learn the secrets of Dislike. They've just launched their Endless Summer update. This gives us the story of Jiao Tu, a classic Chinese god whose fate sees her tied up in an eternal cycle. So to experience the twists and turns through Dislike's captivating turn-based gameplay, soundtrack, and art style, use the link today or the QR code on screen. And don't forget to use the code FIGHTWITHGODS to get 5 free draws and in-game rewards to help support the channel. Now let's get back to peak fiction. again. So let's break this down. Megumi's technique was stolen, and Sukuna is using it way better than he could even imagine. His dad didn't even want him and forgot he existed. His sister was killed by the same technique and by his own hands, which by the way was the only reason behind him becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer in the first place. Gojo, his foster dad, is beating him up right now, whilst all his allies are cheering against him. And then he also got insane brain damage on top of it to become a vegetable? Bruh, we thought nobody could beat Yuji in the depression department, but here's Megumi.
Yo, killing me with this.
So, what is Megumi's status right now? Seeing as how 0.2 seconds of exposure to Gojo's domain equates to half a year's worth of information and 2 months of rehabilitation for any normal person, Megumi is
Khatam. Bye bye. Tata.
By my calculations and degree in anime bullshit science, I can calculate that Megumi has suffered 9 minutes and 9 seconds of unlimited void, meaning that he had his brain flooded with 137 years of information. And even if we take Sorcerer's time to recover as half that of ordinary people, Megumi will need 46 years of therapy to function normally again. He misses Sumiki so much, he's gonna become just like her, comatose. But that's if Megumi survives this battle, because there's not a single thought left in his eyes. Gojo himself stated he can only save those that choose to, but Megumi's willpower is completely finished. The only narrative plot device left for him to be saved is for Yuji Itadori to use his soul-swapping curse technique to enter the domain of the soul. Much like how Sukuna would interact with his vessels, Yuji would have to contact Megumi's soul via the last Sukuna finger that Gojo hid, or he chooses to sacrifice himself by swapping bodies again. This would allow Yuji to interact with Megumi to wake him up from his depressive state in a true shonen fashion, making Yuji's story come full circle, where his wish would come true to have a meaningful death by saving the entire world and be surrounded by those that loved him. But you still might be wondering, ABD, how did Sukuna's plan even work? Well, the precedence of curse techniques impacting souls separately is in chapter 30. Yes, this chapter literally name drops unlimited void when it talks about how domains can affect 2 souls in a body, since Mahito almost his pants seeing Sukuna's soul inside Yuji. The presence of dual souls made Yuji immune to Mahito's technique too, which is why Sukuna could isolate himself and let Mahoraga use Megumi as a medium for adaptation. As soon as Gojo realizes this, he mocks Sukuna for being so desperate in this fight that he has to use a kid as a meat shield. It's ironic that Sukuna looks down on both humans and cursed spirits, but is a parasite himself and needs Megumi to survive. He cannot deny these fraudulent claims.
You're a fake and a fraud.
Now in the end, Sukuna knew that he couldn't take the hits himself or let out Mahoraga because Gojo would have one-shot it easily. Hence, he acknowledges Gojo's domain, stating that it's a pain in the ass. Mostly because the information overload is an attack imbued in his domain alone. So Sukuna wanted to get rid of this trump card. This effectively tells us that Unlimited Void is the strongest and most lethal domain expansion in Jujutsu Kaisen. Even Sukuna had to use hacks in order to be immune to its effects, be it relying on Yuji's memories or Megumi's soul. But Gojo being Gojo threatens to annihilate Sukuna by opening his domain once again. He explains that Megumi's soul took on the process of adaptation, not the result itself. What he means to say is that Megumi was just a medium for Mahoraga's immunity to Unlimited Void, so neither he nor Sukuna himself are immune. As a result, if Gojo casts his domain once again and disposed of Mahoraga, it would be game over and his victory. However, guys, this is Jujutsu Kaisen and nothing goes according to the hero's plan, as Sukuna doesn't have a single worry in the world because he knows that Gojo cannot cast his domain once again. That's when it happens. Gojo starts bleeding rivers of blood through his nose. Earlier, he had brushed it off like it was nothing, but this time it's serious enough to bring him to his knees. This is definitely a painful picture to see. the strongest sorcerer of this era, acknowledged by everybody, even his enemies at his lowest. My man Yuta, on the other hand, is sweating buckets, knowing he's gonna get his ass handed to him if he has to fight Sukuna next. That's why he had no problems with Kashimo saying he wants to go next, you know what I'm saying? But how did Yuta's worst fears materialize? Well, Sukuna states that Gojo has overexerted himself, which is so out of this world that nobody understands it. After all, how can the limitless reach a limit? He explains that one's curse technique is engraved around the right prefrontal cortex of the brain. In fact, Kusakabe even states that the part of the brain concerned with curse techniques is considered to be a literal black box, meaning we have nearly zero information about it. Now, whilst we're talking about this, it is important to note that Kusakabe is not talking about the black box that was shown in Sukuna's dialogue in chapter 118. Remember when he used the fight technique against Jogo, there was a censored black box, as it seems like it was something that we don't really understand just yet. Moving back to the fight, we see Gojo continuously using reverse curse technique to offset his burnout, which put insane amounts of pressure on that part of his brain, thus destroying it. It was clear from the start that performing this process is extremely risky, not just because Gojo is fighting Sukuna, but because of the immense toll it would take on him. This is in fact too dangerous to do even once, and Gojo did it 5 times. Shoko assumed that after the hidden inventory incident, Gojo had become used to healing his brain as he told them. However, it wasn't exactly the case, since Gojo still faced the after effects, as no matter how you look at it, it's not like he's healing a limb or a part of the body that isn't responsible for the origination of the technique in his body. He was using a fried part of his brain to unfry it. But this information about curse techniques lying in the prefrontal cortex is extremely interesting, as it tells us about 2 important things. 1, it explains how Kenjaku is able to store curse techniques and travel across centuries. Since he becomes the brain of the host, he is able to keep everything he possesses and then engrave it on his host's brain. This way, he can store numerous curse techniques. However, the amount is limited to what he can process, as storing too many would fry his brain. This raises another interesting question. When we take a look at Okotsu Yuta, we know that Yuta's storage unit is Rika instead of a black box like Sukuna's. And according to the fanbook, Yuta's curse technique name itself is Rika. This implies that the connection between Yuta and Rika is deeper than what we really understood, as she's literally like an external prefrontal cortex for him. Whilst we don't know what its significance exactly is, this does set up a fight between him and Kenjaku perfectly, as Yuta promised to get revenge for Gojo to take him out. These 2 characters are the most unique cases of having multiple curse techniques that aren't their own in the whole bloody series. However, secondly, this also explains why Gojo stated that Yuji would eventually be able to use Sukuna's curse techniques, as Yuji and Sukuna were sharing the same body. Sukuna's curse technique would end up getting engraved onto the part near Yuji's right prefrontal cortex. Plus, you probably didn't notice, but Sukuna was bamboozled that Itadori was able to suppress his soul and take over his body in the beginning of the story. This was only a foreshadowing of Yuji's actual curse technique that he discovered of soul swapping in chapter 222. However, coming back to the fight, Sukuna further states that Gojo is nearing his limits, and on the off chance that he still has some gas left in the tank, he cannot escape death, as even if Gojo were to open another domain, it wouldn't be able to match Sukuna's, who is in a far healthier state. Hence, Sukuna very kindly, like a typical villain, laid out his plan to summon Malevolent Shrine with a barrier, so Gojo would have nowhere to run or teleport, and he himself would adapt to Gojo's infinity while slicing him up. Sukuna even has the audacity to ridicule Gojo, stating that he was only the strongest because he was born in an era where Sukuna didn't exist. According to him, Gojo is just an ordinary guy, another fish on his cutting board to chop up. This is certainly Sukuna's L moment because Gojo is no ordinary guy by far, and thus more than deserves Sukuna's acknowledgement, right? Think about it. Look at the past. When Jogo was weeping tears, Sukuna told him to stand proud on some real shit. But when Gojo challenged him to rethink his whole life and fix his loneliness, he's like, I sleep.
We do not care.
Overall, Sukuna comes across kinda petty, but guess who is the ultimate clown? Because even with 1000 years of knowledge, he forgot the basic concept that if you're a villain, you should never deliver your one-liners before killing off the hero. Because Sukuna's domain turned into a malfunctioning shrine. It failed. Just as he summons it, Sukuna's domain completely falls apart, exploding into pieces, and he himself starts profusely bleeding throughout his eyes. Now, that's what I would call poetic justice. So what's even happened? Because this dude was just bragging all the way to the moon and back, right? Well, the answer lies in the last domain expansion that Gojo casted. Since Sukuna got delayed by 0.01 seconds to counter with Malevolent Shrine, he just wasn't fast enough to redirect the sure hit attack of Unlimited Void to Megumi after his domain collapsed. Hence, Sukuna was exposed to the attacks of Limited Void, and even 10 seconds of it was detrimental enough to cause Sukuna to be in the same boat as Gojo. On top of that, we can't forget the principle that the soul is the body and the body is the soul, ladies and gentlemen. This is the philosophy of Jujutsu Kaisen. Even though Megumi's soul was the one bearing the burden of Mahoraga's adaptation, they're sharing a body, and thus the brain was still the same. How else was Geto able to respond to Gojo in chapter 91 when Kenjaku had taken over his body? Geto's soul still resides, and Kenjaku states this is the first time in history this has happened. And let's not forget, Sukuna had also copied Gojo's burnout healing quick fix, and even though Gojo did it an astounding 5 times, far more when compared to Sukuna's 3 times, he was getting affected as well. This makes it evident why Gojo stated that his curse technique usage was far better than Sukuna in chapter 226. His curse energy output is huge. He has the ability to one-shot Kaiju Mahoraga, which even Sukuna believes, which is why he did not use it directly. His reinforcement can tank Malevolent Shrine and heal with reverse curse technique even without Limitless. On top of that, Limitless straight up counters almost everything in Jujutsu Kaisen. No wonder Gojo was so confident that he could beat 20 Finger Sukuna at the start itself. If things were fair right now, he technically has beaten Sukuna 3 times over already. But this situation makes Gojo laugh out loud, as they both have the same level of brain damage now. However, this development can tell us about a possible ending for Gojo. If he keeps destroying his brain and going feral, he will eventually reach a point where he is unable to use his curse technique anymore. This will be narratively perfect in 2 ways. Firstly, for the overall story, it will mean that whilst Gojo will not be able to get into any other battle, the other characters will have a chance to fight a weakened Sukuna and even save Megumi with Yuji's soul swapping technique. Secondly, it will create a full circle for Gojo's character as he was bestowed with godhood at his birth itself, altering the balance of the world. He was burdened with the title and obligations of the strongest, which became his identity more than Gojo Satoru, as Geto also stated. However, losing his abilities would make Gojo an ordinary person, someone who could live in a world where he's just Gojo Satoru and nothing else. Whilst he might have to become Kusakabe's apprentice with how much information this guy keeps dishing out every other chapter, other than that, he will finally have a chance at normalcy so that everyone can see him for who he is. I just know he will lose his mind over it though. After all, he loves showing off, because in this fight, Gojo being Gojo again reminds Sukuna of their first encounter in chapter 2, stating that his students are watching. So he's gonna show off a little. So after making this statement, he proceeds to beat the shit out of Megumi's body again, sucker punching Sukuna. Whilst he is beating his ass, Sukuna remembers the words of Yoruzu, being the absolute strongest and the loneliness that comes with it. The one that will teach you love is... Everyone, this links to what Gojo said, that love is the most twisted curse of all. He was correct, because canon fodder Yoruzu's words about love are outlasting her character chapter run itself at this point. And if now Sukuna will rely on the gift Yoruzu gave him before dying, he will have to acknowledge that it was love that saved him in the end. But why do I feel like some red flags are incoming, specifically one named Kenjaku? What if getting Sukuna and Gojo to crush each other into a state where they can't even cast domain is part of his plan? If he swoops in right now, he has a chance to defeat both of them, and it wouldn't be out of his character to find a way to go around whatever binding vow he made with Sukuna, since he's already done it once. But if you want to enjoy even more peak fiction, why not watch the video on your screen right now?